Sunday, September 25th, 2022, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with John Adams again. We've spoken a few times with John on the channel. He runs a YouTube channel called In the Interest of the People. He's based out of New South Wales, Australia. He's also an economist. He's head of Adams Economics. And today he's coming to talk to us about what's going on in Australia in terms of the financial markets, precious metals, and some of the things he's been working on for the last 12 months or so. Welcome, John. How are you?
Thank you, Mario. How are you going today?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you.
Excellent. So yes, so obviously, thank you for the opportunity to come on your show. And so in the last few days, I've done a big reveal on my YouTube channel with Martin North in the interest of the people. And what we revealed to our audience was that for about 9 months, from June of last year, 2021, to April of this year, I worked on a undercover covert investigation. Looking at a conspiracy theory, which was put to me, which involves a high degree of crime, criminality, financial scams, etc. And so I did my own investigation, went to the government, went to the relevant regulator in Australia, which is ASIC, Australian Securities and Investments Commission, and we lodged that 608-page complaint, which took me about $50,000 to put together with a whole team that I had to assemble. And the chance of getting an official investigation was 0.74%. But the good news is that after about 2.5 months of vetting by the regulator of our material, they've pushed the button and an investigation is underway. So that is happening. I got confirmation about that in July, and here we are at the end of September. And so now it's a matter of waiting to see what happens in that investigation and what are the ramifications, which if our allegations are true, the ramifications are going to be systemically important for Australia, but also I think for investors around the world, but also I think governments in terms of regulators. So that's obviously the big news out of Australia in terms of what I've been working on and what we've revealed over the last few days. But the reason why I think this is quite relevant, Mario, in the context of your channel is obviously you're based in London. Only last month did BBC Panorama do a full-hour show about the $1 billion savings scandal. So that there's a particular investment firm that basically ripped a lot of people off. People lost their life savings in a particular scam. And what was very interesting about that particular episode by the BBC was that they went to town on your regulator, which is the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. And during this period of time where the FCA was given multiple warnings about problems in the financial markets, problems with this particular firm, and the risk to investors in losing their life savings, who was the head of the FCA? Andrew Bailey, who's now the governor of the Bank of England. And the BBC was highly critical, as well as some of the people who were on the show. And so the issue that I think, Murray, you've communicated a lot with your audience over the last few years that I've been watching you, is obviously talking about risk, macroeconomic risk, financial risk. Obviously, you and I are both advocates of precious metals because if you're holding a piece of gold or silver in your hand, there's no counterparty risk. But when you do have counterparty risk, there are all sorts of problems in Australia, in the UK, US, right across the world in terms of Now, what I would say is there are some counterparties that just have bad luck, or the markets turn against them and they lose money, and that is quite legitimate. But then you have deliberate fraudsters and scammers who go out of their way trying to take people's money. And the one thing I've learned in terms of trying to understand counterparty risk is that a lot of retail investors, unsophisticated investors as well, and these are some terms that we use in Australia, they think they're doing proper due diligence about the counterparty, but when you start to talk to investors and say, well, what did you actually do before you entered into this transaction, you realize that there wasn't a lot of proper due diligence that these people in terms of what they actually did. So I think these are very important themes that you talk about on a consistent basis. And when I got told by two people in Australia last year of a particular scheme that had been happening for 1 to 2 decades, I thought it was really important that I look into it, given that it looked like no one in the establishment was either aware or doing anything about it. And so we went on the journey of trying to uncover the truth. And obviously, the legal advice I got was to go to the government, so we did that. And we hope that we're going to have some big news in the next 3 to 6 months.
So yes, John, I have spoken many times, and I keep telling people about counterparty risk, especially in the markets that we cover on the channel. And I even remember a few years ago that Morgan Stanley, for example, they were charging deposit fees for holding silver for clients, and it was found out that eventually found out because clients wanted the silver and they didn't have the silver, and they were fined by the regulator in the US. So yes, I know you can't talk about the details of this case, but how long do you think it's going to take for something to come out? And what do you think the repercussions are going to be for the overall financial system, not just in Australia, but in the UK and the US?
Sure. So we're really in the hands of, in terms of the regulator and how long their investigation takes. I mean, one of the things that I really appreciated was that when people say they have evidence, what people think in YouTube land or the alternative media of what evidence is, and versus what evidence that courts and lawyers and barristers, what they consider the evidence to be. I mean, it's sort of chalk and cheese. So it took me, I don't have any special legal powers as a civilian, so it took me a lot of time to collect and assemble the evidence that I have. And so now it's in the government's bailiwick. They have the opportunity with their proper legal powers to actually expedite the investigation and to find out what's really going on. So I'm hoping we're going to have some sense of where this is up to by Christmas, and we'll obviously have to just wait and see in terms of what the government actually finds. Because what we did, Murray, was we alleged a whole host of offences that we found in the course of our investigation, and I think some of the offences we can clearly demonstrate based on our work that those offences have been committed, and then the other offences have to be further evidence has to be collected by in terms of ASIC, and then they'll have to determine whether those other offences have been whether they have been committed or not. But when we talk about the implications in terms of financial markets, whether we talk about Morgan Stanley and silver, or if we talk about managed investment schemes, or in terms of what happened with Bernie Madoff in 2008 in terms of a huge Ponzi scheme. I mean, anytime you hear of a large scandal where a long-running scheme was happening in the dark for a long time, and then it becomes revealed. Typically, what happens in those instances that you have significant investor losses, and then you have a whole host of questions, recriminations. What who knew, what in terms of what are the broader implications in terms of the market. So I mean, obviously what happened with subprime mortgages had global implications. because Australian companies, individuals, even at some of our local governments were investing in some of these subprime bonds, and they were relying on the rating agencies to tell them the truth about the quality of these products. And when those products failed, I'm pretty sure Australia was the first jurisdiction in the world to actually get a successful settlement out of the rating agencies, because when it came to a class action against the rating agencies, their argument legally was that our ratings are just our opinion, and so no one should have. We're not legally liable if we made up the wrong assessment. And I think the people suing the rating agencies basically said, no, your ratings are just more than an opinion. I mean, you basically set the market, and so because you set the market and you didn't tell us, give us an accurate view of these subprime bonds, they were a huge issue. They basically argued that these rating agencies were liable, and then they came to a huge payout and settlement. So that was a landmark case in terms of Australia. But obviously, when the Madoff scandal happened in 2008, $65 billion. I think Harry Markopolos, when he testified to Congress, he said a lot of Europeans had money in the Madoff scheme. A lot of Americans did. Because of that particular scandal, there was huge reform in terms of the SEC, because they were told 5 times by Harry that Madoff was ripping people off in a huge Ponzi scheme, and they decided to do nothing about it. So thing is that so if the case that we've looked at does come out the way we suspect it's going to come out, there'll be so I think it's just not an Australian scandal. I think it will be a global scandal, and I think that investors, market participants, regulators, governments all around the world will be looking at this particular case, and then obviously seeing what the implications are. Now, part of the issue that we had, Mario, was that because I don't have access to all the information and all the records, we had to provide a range of estimates as to how small or how large we think the particular scheme is. So we were given certain information during our investigation, and based on that information, we provided a worst case scenario and best case scenario in terms of potential money on the table, potential investors, but also in terms of the impact on the market in terms of its material effect. So it could well be that. It could be that our allegations don't stack up, or it could be that the fraud was a small scale, or it could be a large systemic scale. So there's some of the uncertainties that we had to face. But typically, as I've said in a recent interview, and obviously this is what happened with Madoff. The longer a scheme continues on, and it continues to be undetected, the more chance that the scheme is going to be larger rather than smaller. So there are obviously some of the impacts that people have to consider. But the other thing I would say, Mario, is that if for your European or for your UK audience as well, when you're dealing with a counterparty, and I don't care if it's a bullion dealer, whether it's a bank, whether it's an investment bank, a managed investment scheme, even in terms of property, stocks, etc. I think there's some very basic things that people need to be able to do so that they can actually check to make sure whether they actually have accurately assessed counterparty risk. And so some very basic things is, if there's a contract, make sure you read the contract before you enter into the transaction, and make sure you understand the contract. And if you don't understand the contract, go get proper, financial or in terms of legal advice to understand what the implications of the contract is. So a lot of retail investors don't do those things. Typically what they'll see is they'll see some fancy documentation with some complex language. they'll see a professionally looking website, and they think that it's a that they think that it is a proper operation. Obviously, there's a lot of people who think that that they rely heavily on the regulator. That if there's any issues, the regulator would be aware of it. I mean, typically, what I found, particularly in the Australian situation, regulators only find out once the damage is done. But their ability to detect financial scams early on, that they have limited capacity, and I would say that's a feature both of the Australian system, but also in terms of the British system. And I think the BBC documentary, presented that quite well. So so obviously doing a background check about the counterparty, whether it's an individual or company, or if it's a company, the people running that particular company, obviously looking at their track record, seeing if there's any sort of red flags that people need to be able to see. Obviously, like I said, in terms of reading the contract, obviously one of the other things that I think is very important is that if you, so whether, no matter what investment class it is you want to be able to be in a position that you can liquidate the asset and go back into fiat currency, particularly if you want to move from one asset class to another. So being sure about your ability to liquidate the asset and the chances of the counterparty paying it back, because obviously when things go wrong, the first thing that happens is that the counterparty will default on their obligations and you don't get your money back. And then when you can't get your money back, you then have to spend more money going through courts, trying to chase that counterparty so that they can, try to give you some money, and sometimes those processes can take years and a lot of money, particularly if it results in a huge class action. So, having a bit of thought about some of these concepts, I think, are highly important. So because, I have a lot of I'm not sure about you, Mario, I have a lot of my wealth in precious metals. So, and physical precious metals, and because I do, that means that I have, perhaps less counterparty risk compared to others. But then you have, other advocates in the precious metal space that say you should only have 5 or 10% of your of your portfolio in precious metals. So if you only got, say, 5%, well, then you'll have some other money being held by in terms of other asset classes, whether it's savings in the bank or whether it's a managed investment scheme or in terms of particular investments in terms of the equity markets or bonds, etc. So no matter the composition of your portfolio, you need to be very cognizant of those counterparties you're dealing with, and obviously being very careful about understanding the implications of the transaction you've engaged in, the quality of the asset, the quality of the counterparty, and obviously being sure that if something does go wrong, you know what to do in that situation, and you can, I guess, try to recover as much of your capital as you can without expending too much money on legal fees and wasting years of your life trying to recover your financial position.
You said earlier that the chance, is it ASICs, the regulator, right, in Australia?
Yes.
Yes. Chance of getting them to see, investigate a case is less than 1%. So you've done really well having them look at your decide to investigate your case. How confident are you that they're going to rule in favor of your allegations? Have you got any ideas? And this is like a civil case, so it's not like a criminal case where people are going to end up in jail, or could they eventually end up in jail?
Well, no. So we've alleged both civil and criminal offences. So we're saying that both criminal and civil parts of the law have been breached. So that's obviously what we are alleging to the government, and obviously the government has to then go and whether and test to see whether our allegations stack up or not. But obviously in the course of the government's investigation, they may find new information that may lead to charges that we didn't even foreshadow. So now, in terms of the chances, I do think that one of the big issues that that we've had in Australia for many years, but also I think it'd be relevant around the world is the issue of disclosure. So I mean, any time you disclose something to investors or the market, that information has to be accurate. It has to be properly put together, and a lot of Australians have fallen foul of scammers and in terms of other people because the documents that they relied upon were pretty much either fraudulent or they were put together in the wrong way. So I think the issue of disclosure is something that we've been able to uncover. And the documents we've been able to collect clearly demonstrate that there's an issue with the accuracy of representations to the market. So I think on that front, the breaches of law that we allege in relation to disclosure are pretty clear cut. But then when it comes to some of the other charges that we have alleged, we have. So I think in my interview with Martin North, I talked about using this method of triangulation. So using different techniques to see if to be able to see whether the evidence, whether it points in the same direction towards the conspiracy, or whether the evidence points in a different direction. So I think the evidence we've collected to date, it pretty much suggests that the chances are that the scheme that we think that I was told is happening is happening in Australia, and so it really now depends on whether the government actually can get other evidence that confirms what we suspect, or whether they collect other evidence which tells a completely different story.
Yeah, and you spent, of course, a lot of time and effort and money bringing this case and getting all the evidence that you could drum up. So maybe to wrap up, you could tell the viewers about your GoFundMe that could help you, recover some of that. Sure.
Yes. So because I basically had to start from scratch and put this case together. I did have to assemble a team, and the team consisted of lawyers and barristers and accountants, auditors, subject matter experts. We had to hire private investigators to go collect certain types of evidence that would be in a legal way. So there are some rules and regulations in New South Wales about licensed private investigators. So all of that sort of cost money to be able to put together. And because we went to significant lengths and significant cost, we were able to put together a very solid case, and because we did, even though the chances is less than 1%, that's why I think we were able to pull off the miracle and actually get an official investigation, because of the time and the effort that we were able to put together. So now that I'm at this part of the process, I think it was well worth the investment. Although I have to say, when you go through the process, and you have no idea what's going to be the end result, you obviously sort of questioning in your mind, whether the whole effort and the whole project is going to turn out the way that you want it to turn out. Now one of the things that I've said, and just for your audience, and obviously you have a number of Australians that who watch you as well. So between myself and my co-partner in the interest of the people, Martin North, we've worked on a number of initiatives. A few years ago, we stopped the government trying to criminalize cash. So there was right across Europe, there are rules around not being able to transact in physical cash above a certain level. So in France, in Spain, and Italy, I think it's around maybe 100 to 300 euros is what you're allowed to transact, and you're not allowed to transact above that. In 2016, they tried that in Germany, and then one of the major German newspapers railed against that particular law. So Germany defeated a proposed cash transaction ban. And then when they tried it in Australia in 2019, my YouTube channel broke the story first. We were first in the country before the alternative media and the mainstream media, and then we led the campaign to basically stop that law from coming into being. took us 16 months, and our efforts. One of the things that happened during that campaign was that I was actually called to testify to Parliament, and so I was one of the subject matter experts that basically said that the government's arguments for this proposed law don't stack up, and that that we don't think that this law will actually achieve what the government wants, and we think that there's another alternative agenda around the elimination of cash and negative interest rates and some of the other concepts that I've spoken on my channel and you've spoken on your channel, and so we were able to overcome that. So one of the things I've learned, particularly in this project, is if you want to get change and you want to actually get real results, it does take a lot of time, effort, and particularly if it's of a more well, depending on the nature of the project, political projects, don't cost a lot of money. But when it comes to hiring experts, etc., if you need those people, if you need those resources, all of that does cost money. So part of the GoFundMe account and the campaign, my public Crusader fund that I've put together, it's not really necessarily about recouping the cost of my investigation that I've just completed. It's really about giving me the opportunity to look at other public initiatives that I may be able to pursue in Australia, particularly if they have international ramifications, and then obviously use that money to invest in a whole host of new projects where we can actually drive change and try to, one of the things I've listened to in the last few months quite vividly is Michael Jackson and Heal the World. So whether we're healing the world or whether we're trying to make the world a better place, the last couple of years has been a horrendous experience for a lot of people, both in terms of political and civil rights, but also in terms of financially, emotionally, socially. The UK has gone through lockdowns and a whole host of harsh COVID-19 measures. So have we here in Australia, and a lot of people have suffered during that process. And obviously one of the big consequences of COVID-19 and COVID-19 economic management has been inflation. So they printed like crazy, they spent like drunken sailors, and now we have an inflation problem right around the world, and central banks are trying to raise rates, trying to put the inflation genie back in the bottle. But unfortunately, I don't think any of the central banks are going to be successful in getting inflation under control, because to be able to do so, they're going to if we're going to follow the Taylor rule, they'll have to raise rates dramatically a lot higher than where we are, and at those interest rates, the financial system is going to crash, and we would easily have the world's biggest depression. So because they can't raise rates because of the quantum of debt in the system, that's why I think stagflation is going to be an ongoing problem. And so COVID-19 has had a huge negative impact right across the board. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to correct the wrongs of the last few years, and that's what I'm committed to doing, where I think I can actually have success and try in terms of making a difference. And so raising money through this fund will give me that opportunity to start the next project, and hopefully we are able to get good outcomes.
Yes, I think there was a German central banker who said that inflation is like a toothpaste. Once the toothpaste comes out of the tube, it's very difficult to put it back in. And as for your efforts, I think you've proven, with the cash, they want to ban cash in Australia over a certain amount. You've done a good job there, and I think you're going to be successful, hopefully, in this case. And so what I'm going to do is going to put a link to the GoFundMe in the description of the channel. John, thank you for coming on the channel, and have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you for your time, Mario.
You're welcome.